Decided to bring transportation and some of our planning and process back since we haven't done this for a while. Tony is gonna kick us off here, I believe, or Brad, on the highway corridor planning and project delivery. And then we will have a follow-up meeting on some other items regarding transportation at the next meeting in March. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Brad.
All right, well, we're looking forward to presenting this information. So I'm going to start off and then I'll be turning over to Tony, Andy, and Craig. We each got different slides to talk through here, and we'll just get started. So the agenda, we wanted to start out with a high-level overview of what we call building that regional roadway system, and just remind commissioners how that's done through the transportation plan, hitting the kind of the core requirements of the functional classification system and the importance of access management. Then we'll drill down to spotlighting a couple of corridor studies that you're very familiar with, and then getting into project delivery. And I think this will be the part of the workshop we're really looking for some good discussion. We want to talk about what's our role as staff on some of these road projects, what's our consultant's role. But guess what? We also want to talk about what is your role as commissioners when we're working through some of these road projects. Talk about the city's role, and then public input. Again, I think we're looking for some good discussion on the type of public input we get for these projects. Some core requirements for building the regional system. I think it's pretty well known that it takes a shared vision. We heard about that at the 169 Corridor Coalition work. A long game approach. These transportation plans do not get realized in 1 year, 2 years. It takes 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years or longer to achieve that ultimate vision for the system. During that time frame, it's a lot of partnerships with our cities and townships. I think it's notable that oftentimes you're working with a lot of different elected officials throughout that 30, 40 years. And so it's a lot of education and getting everyone back to why are we building this system? What is the ultimate vision? You know that there's always a dynamic relationship between road planning and land use and development. And those really impact one another. If you make some bad land use decisions, it can really result in costly fixes in our transportation system. And there's always tension, and sometimes you're right in the living room of that tension between what's the public good versus the impact to that property owner or business owner. What's the kind of the long range tension? What's the short term tension? And we try to sort through that through some of our public input that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I know that's something that you deal with as commissioner. These are the 5 goals that have really shaped the county's transportation plan in the last 2 cycles. And it will, again, be the framework for the 2050 transportation plan. Our biggest investments is in preserving what we've already built, the infrastructure that's already in the ground. So that is what I think is one of the highest priorities, managing what we already have built for our transportation system. With our growth, there will always be a need to improve and expand and look for alternative modes, and that's the bicycles and trails, and making sure that we're adequately planning for that demand here in the county, and then starting to look at what corridors, what intersections do we need to start focusing on in the future with our transportation. I think many of you have seen this several times, the functional classification system. It's that band between providing more and more access along roads and then equally providing more mobility. And you start with those local roads, the city streets and the township roads where you have a lot of driveways providing direct access to homes and businesses. Of course, these are not the roads that you're going to travel a long distance on. You're going to hop on to either some of the collectors and then finally the arterial system to go long distance to other destinations. The pie chart there shows just the percent of our roadways in each of those classifications. 64% of our roads here are those local roads and city streets. 17% is collectors, 15% is our minor arterials, and then 4% is our principal arterials. the smallest percentage, but I think it has the biggest impact of moving our residents across the county and across the region. Before we get into each of those classifications a little bit more, I'll just ask if Craig or Tony, if you want to say anything more about this slide.
I think the next couple slides will kind of go through each of them, then getting into the importance of each of these and what they mean. I think it's important to understand that the hierarchy of the roadways and what they all mean, because they all serve a different purpose, whether that's a local roadway, an arterial, or a principal arterial.
From a county highway perspective, from our system, principal arterials and minor arterials are kind of the major classification. And it kind of trails down to collectors, and local roadways would be more of the city and township roadways as well.
All right, so those local streets, we have about 890 miles of local streets. You can see the traffic volumes on those. Low speeds, again, meant to provide a lot of access points. Most people travel on their local streets less than a mile to either get to their destination or to get onto a collector or an arterial, often 2 lanes. And these are the streets that fall under our city and township jurisdictions. We don't have local streets under the county jurisdiction. Moving up to the collectors, you start getting a little bit more volumes, a little bit higher speeds, but still 30 to 35 miles an hour. Again, relatively shorter trips. Some of the collectors in our urban areas get up to 3 lanes. Now we start talking about intersection spacing, where if there is new development, where we'd want to see that first intersection along the collector. Again, most of these collectors are in our cities and townships, but we do have some counties that function as collectors. Minor arterials, now we're starting to move up to more county and state roadways, higher volumes of traffic, higher speed. Again, medium length, maybe 3, 4, 5 miles or longer, multiple lanes. Here now we're starting to really manage that access onto minor arterials because they are meant for mobility and higher speeds. We don't want to see a lot of driveways or road intersections on our arterials, so we space that out a little bit more. Finally, up to our principal arterials, about 56 miles. Again, it's about 4%, but it has our greatest traffic volumes. Again, longer trips, very limited access. These are always falling under the state or the counties. Anything else on the table? I want to spotlight any of these roads?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that on the very bottom there where it says it's 4% of the system from mileage standpoint, but handles 50% of the vehicles miles traveled in the county.
All right, the next 2 slides are taken right out of a slideshow that we used to do a lot with newly elected and appointed officials through SCALE. If you remember that, if you were a new council member or commissioner, we would often invite you once a year to training on the importance of transportation, land use, and economic development. And these were a couple of slides from that presentation. This really gets to that hierarchy and figuring out how to best serve development on this functional classification system. You want to make sure that you're providing good local roads to serve that development. Oftentimes along arterials, that's a frontage road or a backage road. But those local roads serving the development, dumping onto a collector dumping onto a minor arterial, and then the minor arterial dumping onto the principal arterial. So that's kind of an important principle, I think, when we look at a lot of land use and transportation issues, when we look at corridor studies. How do we get the motorist kind of on a safe pattern, starting at lower speeds directly from their home or business onto a collector, onto an arterial?
Question it occurred to me prior to this. It's like our transportation sales tax, we use it mainly for the MDOT system, not so much for local programs. Why? What would you say? I know that. What would you say to a newly elected person and why? Or say to Mary Liz Holberg why? Because she wants the opposite. She said never spent anything on that system.
I would say it serves our residents, it serves everybody, from our residents to our businesses, commerce throughout the county, within and through our county. So they're our highest level and most important. And as you saw, the traffic volumes and what they serve, it's the highest. And so it's important that those function well. If those break down, you won't be able to get from your local streets to the arterials to get to the principal arterials to get wherever you want to go within and across and throughout our county and the region.
So when we sat through these discussions, and we also had Commissioner Ulrich in 2015, the board was really clear that they felt somewhere around a third of it came from outside of our county. And the roads that did the most to spur economic support were the principal arterials. So it's just like Tony said, it's 4% of your system, but 50% of the vehicles travel on it. And so if you're trying to support the overall economic development in communities that you're trying to build here within the county, the decision was to invest in those first, which also included Trunk Highway 13 South, County Highway 42 and 17. So it's the entire principal arterial system, not just MDOT's roads. But those are the roads that move people to support the economic development of the community. And that became pretty clear in 15. And when you held the public hearing in 21, I think for 22, it was that same decision point.
Thank you.
So we talked about the importance of that corridor access management, and oftentimes we'd share with newly elected officials, what happens if you don't coordinate that very well? What are the consequences? And I think we deal with those consequences a lot in our corridor studies, and it's a lot of retrofitting decisions that were made in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. Examples of that is where someone would split off their farmstead or split off their parcel along a roadway and get some additional driveways. So they're kind of those small uncoordinated land use decisions at the time didn't seem like a big deal, but as more and more of those things occur along the corridor, you start creating some of those problems. And often reach a point in some of our corridors where now you're looking at some pretty expensive solutions to change the alignment of a roadway away from some of this existing development so that that development no longer takes access onto a principal arterial. It's closing access points. It's building new frontage roads to serve some of these existing neighborhoods. So it's that idea of trying to stay in front of that. And I think over the last 30, 40 years, the county has done a better job trying to get ahead of that, working closely with our cities and townships to really think ahead where future access may need to be considered when we're looking at some of these small developments. Any other thing on this slide?
I would say I'm going to talk a little bit about County Highway 17. And I just want you to remember this slide in a few minutes. I'm going to refer back to this. And then the other one right before this, in which is kind of the goal of the hierarchy of the roadway system and what we want to build towards. So just kind of remember this one.
Last couple comments on the functional classification. So this is a map that you've seen before. This is in the 2040 plan showing our principal arterials, A and B minor arterials, collectors, county, local roads. This is an important map for our planning, and it's important for the region and is the basis for some of the funding and some decision making that happens at the Metropolitan Council. Craig?
Yeah, this is the official, back in 2018, this was a snapshot in time. But this is what's recognized by Met Council, MnDOT, and then, they have to report this to mileage to FHWA. So it's something that is tracked and kind of shown that in time in 2018.
If I was going to look back at this map in 2050, how many of these roads would be turned back, if any? Would 18 be gone by then?
Oh, surely. Yeah, no, we've already got approval to do that.
And then,
Yeah, no, there's several that already from,
Yep.
go ahead. Yeah, there's several already that have been turned back that are on this map here.
Okay.
Yep.
Like that 56 out there in Cedar Lake, is that, I can't remember, is that 85?
Nothing's planned for that right now from a turn back standpoint.
There was 87 and
Oh, 87.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the recognized functional classification map, but since the 2000s, we've taken it even a step further and mapped this future functional class. This is really important for us at a planning level to know what the ultimate kind of build out of our system would look like based on projected growth and traffic volumes and where we need to alleviate some congestion and building a good north, south, east, west grid system properly spaced so we can really disperse that traffic. This gives guidance on how much right of way we would need to achieve this future. And so when plats come in, oftentimes we're looking for additional right of way to accommodate the future principal or arterial that may be an 8 or a 17. What else is the importance of the future functional class?
Well, I think it's really setting that vision for the county. And it's consistent with Met Council spacing guidelines, where they look at it in rural areas. You should have spacing of your principal arterials at 6 to 12 miles. And then in suburban, spacing for principal arterials was 2 to 6 miles. So this really set that vision of kind of that major north-south kind of the middle of the county, and then having 8 and 86 in the middle and southern end of the county to have that vision to, as Brad said, make sure that we're setting our access spacing up correctly where we are right away acquired so that we can achieve this vision and have that meet those spacing requirements for that mobility in this county.
And that's probably the most painful thing there is to do, right? Is to go back and retrofit a road like County Highway 42 or County Highway 17. I think you're going to talk about it. But if you go back to the 1967, when they set up the Metro Highway system, they didn't look beyond the 42s and the 169s, which then created issues for those developing areas that made it hard to preserve the access of the right of way. And so that's why it's so important to get out in front of it. Preserve corridors like 169. If that hadn't been on that Metro Highway system map, could you have imagined trying to update that road in the mid-90s? It wouldn't have happened. And so that's why you have to look forward into the future for that preservation.
And we've been a leader in the region for this type of preservation with this look in 2030 when we first had these future principal arterials with this future functional class. The previous map didn't have 42 to 17 going north up to 169 in 2018, but we since made that. And so we've achieved some of this plan here already with the overall plan to have kind of north, south, and east, west. And we actually inspired Dakota County to start doing planning and set their future functional class as well of having, as our county road 8 is east, west, they would have 70 going east, west across their counties of future principal, and then also 86 in their county as well, where before they weren't preserving or looking for that east, west roadway there. So we've kind of inspired that idea of having those principal arterials set out here and kind of achieve that overall spacing criteria that was set out by the Met Council.
All right, so that's just been a real general overview of kind of that big picture planning that we do. And I want to start narrowing down to corridor studies. These are where you're starting to look at specific roadways and starting to identify where there's some safety concerns, where's there some maybe congestion, a little bit of bottleneck. Let's start looking at some crash data. What are the kind of the environmental constraints? Look at a variety of things to start looking at how can we best manage the corridor and or improve segments of the corridor. And then after you've gone through a series of steps, just looking at what are the issues, you want to start looking at prioritizing what are the road projects or intersection improvements that we want to start focusing on. How are we going to fund these? What are they eligible for funding depending on the roadway? How do some of these improvements intersect with freight and transit and our utilities and fiber, really trying to get kind of down to some really more narrower issues to think through. It's during the corridor studies that we also do public engagement, and I think they're what I'd call more that macro engagement, inviting property owners and businesses to help provide input on the importance of the corridor, how they use the corridor, what are some things that they notice traveling the corridor. Not necessarily site specific yet, but just what are those corridor wide issues we want to start looking at as we go forward.
I just know that we're going to talk about public engagement in its place throughout this a lot today. Can you give some good examples? Because we went through some really significant corridor studies where that public engagement has, changed course, influenced what we do, that type of thing.
Yeah, there's lots of different steps when we talk about public engagement. One is at the big corridor level
Yeah.
yep, Craig's gonna kick off with 42 because I really think that was the big one that kind of set the framework for a lot of other studies. It was very long, very robust, a lot of people involved in that. And then when we get down to project specific open houses, it's a project that's already programmed.
Yep, different engagement.
Yep. A different engagement process, and we'll talk about that at the very end, kind of some different stages with that and when we're going to engage with them. So, yeah, most of these are, if it's at the planning stage, or the design stage, they're already in our program. But it's not that the public is necessarily out there, looking at our
Right.
program all the time. So it is new to them when they get a note saying, oh, we got a study going on, or, oh, there's actually a project that's coming. I'd like to learn about that and have some input in that. So there's lots of different, over many, many years, period on some of these, whether it's a study or a specific project.
So Commissioner Brecky, I think maybe part of that as well is if you take the 169 study, each one of the townships and cities adopted concerns they had specifically that influence, does an interchange go at Bluff or does it go at this location or that location? So they play roles at that high level on how it fits into their community and where they want to see it. Is it a 59 or a 66 or potentially? And so they play roles there, the public and the local agencies. I think Craig will probably talk about 42, but when we went through that study, you will see that Burnsville's comments look totally different than Rosemounts and Shakopee did at the time. And because of when you were establishing it, it changed some of the access along the way. And what does it mean for their corridor and their development? So at the high level, it places where some of the key
Certainly.
environmental and I think economic development junctures are, that helps establish that.
Yep, and I think we understand that. I just always think it's good for us to have the examples for when we're trying to explain. Yep, that was the kind of input that went into the corridor study that helped us get to here. So that's why I was asking.
And I do think it gets lost sometimes. You go, okay, the 42 study, that was in 1999 when that was completed. It was a couple years in the works to get to that point, but then adoption of all those agencies along that roadway, it's a long time ago for a lot of people. They're not aware of that. So it is a constant kind of reminder that this was the framework in establishing the vision for this corridor. And after that, so 20 some years ago, as this has evolved, there's oftentimes other studies as big developments come along, proposed road networks, things like that. So it really does establish that vision for the corridor and then building off that acceptance of that vision.
And I wasn't personally involved, but I've heard that some of the engagement that was done for the Bluff Drive overpass and some of the connecting roads there was influenced by some of the input from the business owners and residents, and I think in a positive way.
Yeah.
So that's one area that I've heard that there was some change coming out of those engagements.
So if you go back to the corridor study itself, Bluff Drive was one at that point. Sand Creek didn't want an interchange. And guess why? What was going on at that? An amphitheater discussion. And so from a transportation standpoint, though, it hung in there because it was the right place for the connection. And you don't let that influence one tiny thing, influence a decision the entire community state has to make.
So I would encourage you to study deeply, reflect on it, discuss with each other the community considerations that the council has now made. It's what you've done in public engagement in the past is not the same as it will have to future, jump through those hoops. So I feel really passionate. This is an equity kind of thing for them down there. The barber basically said this needs to pass no matter what's happening in her community. She referred to ICE. So somehow she connected ICE and to community considerations for roads. It's kind of bizarre, but anyway, you're gonna have to jump through hoops. Right?
Well, and I just want to jump into, part of it is things change. Like we do these studies, they're fresh to those that were there, the process was through the studies. Roadways change, populations change. We have our projections, a lot of times from Met Council that they've had to make some changes there that, you know, like it's not a perfect science. And I know we're gonna talk about 17, but the more that we can just be aware of comms, the communications that we're doing, that those closest to the studies, oh yeah, that was back in 09. Remember we did that? And I know the cities maybe had to sign off on them then, but it's a constant sort of re-educating or, I don't know how we do our communications works. I know engagement is always one of those hard things to get through the public. For a lot of years, I was heads down, raising the camera. Like, what? No, I got to keep the baseball hockey. So I don't know what that mechanism is, communication, highway, but for all facets, how do we keep that as current as we can without overdoing it? No, I'm getting some looks, but
You're not getting looks, but I think 40 years of experience will tell you that until it's in your backyard, you don't necessarily overly engage, right?
I totally get that.
And so
Yep,
when
I
a
totally get
project
that.
finally gets to impacting somebody, and when you're talking a principal arterial like 17 or 42, it's not about party next to it.
Yep.
It's about the entire corridor, which is to Commissioner Ulrich's point, the roads that sometimes have to engage on, that's a very hard discussion, right? And
Yep.
so even if every open house we had, from the preliminary down to the final one, showed the study and the corridor study, that's not what they're there to look at. And so it's, how do you talk about the importance of that corridor and get people to understand that? And that, it just takes time and lots of meetings. So,
Let me give an example if I could. And this is the difference between how something happens in an urban, heavily urban area versus our kind of area. They want you to demonstrate how the project originated from the community. So it's not, you think your seat is better. How did this originate from the community? Not an urban area, so it's a pre-existing urban area. That probably happens fairly often where there's a uproar of interest on something from the community that spurs something on. Well, out in our area, many people living there, design something for future, but you're gonna have to demonstrate how it originated from the community.
Good example.
All right, so we're going to spotlight 3 corridor studies, County Highway 42, County Road 17, and County Road 27. We're going to spotlight those, just kind of refresh your memory on them, and then also maybe talk a little bit about what you recall of the public engagement and some of the interaction with the cities, and then we'll get back to what our roles are. So we'll start with County Highway 42.
Yep, I can go actually to the next slide. All right, so number 42 study was a pretty expansive study for Scott County at the time. It dealt with Dakota County and 7 cities, looking at the system of 42 and what the needs are to improve 42 in the long term to be that east-west principal arterial. It is the highest volume in the state for a county road, over by Burnsville, in Burnsville by 35, it's over 50,000 vehicles a day. In our border with Burnsville, it's in that kind of low to mid 30s right now for vehicles, 30,000 vehicles a day or so. Now, because this is operated by the counties, it's on the national highway system. Usually those types of roadways that are on NHS are state owned roadway. We have this as kind of a future turn up, I guess, to MnDOT is shown in our long-term plans. That's been discussed for 20, 30 years at least. Don't know will that will happen, but we're continuing to see that as kind of that state, that future state system. So the 42 study had an access management plan. It laid out all the future accesses, existing accesses, and what to do with that system to improve, reduce congestion and kind of improve the overall speeds in the corridor. And then also had supporting roadway network.
Craig, is it been consistently the highest volume county roadway in the state since the study in 99 to now? Like every year it's been the highest volume?
Yes, I believe so.
I think maybe Cedar Avenue and Apple Valley is slightly higher
Okay.
because it's actually a county road at McAndrew.
Mhm.
So from that point to 42 is, I think, maybe slightly higher. They're very close.
Okay.
As Lakeville
Yeah,
has expanded, it's made.
Right.
Right. And nothing in the north has become a higher
No.
volume county roadway on the north
There-
suburbs?
There's not a
13 is not as-
there's not a, in the state of Minnesota, there's not a non-interstate trunk highway that has a higher volume than this,
Thank
like
you.
by a long shot, including like 52 down in Rochester, other areas. There's not another trunk highway.
Thanks. Yeah, I
has
knew
volumes
that
like
points in
that.
history it was. I just wonder if it's been consistent.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the map, this was taken from the study itself, really laid out a system of potential improvements in the corridor, or at least that would help 42 overall. In our county, it showed the potential to upgrade Trunk Highway 13 to a freeway, which is now 30 some years later, we didn't worked on. And it also had some supporting roadways shown, and it also had the extension of 21, which would help the overall system in our county. So there were some things done, and some things did not get accomplished off this map. But overall, it really laid that vision in the study overall to kind of have those supporting roads and have that overall system and those improvements that are needed to help the overall operations. Questions?
At one point, I thought I had heard that County Road 10, comes through Lydia. It was gonna hit up with, maybe 190th and then cut through Credit River by that Crestview area on 68. Did anybody remember? Do you remember that?
68 up to 21, yep.
68 to 21.
Yep.
Yep.
Is that still out there?
We have some right-of-way reserve, but that's it. There's nothing in our plan to.
But
put
it's
it out
still
there.
sitting somewhere on the back burner that it could get resurrected. Maybe not in any of our working time, but
Correct.
because at one point, I thought back in 09, 010, I thought when Mike Sabota was, I thought that was going to happen. One
There
of
was,
those first years there, right?
there was some discussion early on to potentially do a piece of it, but it wouldn't have made
Okay.
that connection from 68 up to
When
21.
there was some development right along 21, there was a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
development never
Okay.
occurred. When I look at this map, the planned roadway segments that catch my eye is this notion of connecting 42 to 78 through a neighborhood.
And that was discussed.
Oh, that was discussed, and there was a state patrol officer who lived in that neighborhood, and we were probably, Craig, about 8 months too late before that development started to go in. But that would have been a very good connection. We were just about a year too late on that. That one and the one on extending 46 through Murphy-Hanrahan Park shut
Yep.
down the Dakota County email system. If you remember how those worked back in the late 90s, so.
Yep, and then this Connolly Parkway extension through what is now property owned by the SMSC. So of course, a lot of dynamics in trying to implement these visions when you get change in ownership and development and all the different things that happen over the course of 40 years.
And we've got a comp plan update coming by 2028. So I think a lot of this is good timing and So a lot of discussion like this will continue on over the next couple of years. So this is, I would argue 42 is the most important east-west roadway south of the Minnesota River and the Mississippi River. I mean, it's 30 miles from 169 over towards Hastings where it connects in at Trunk Highway 55. And so the number of agencies, the volume of traffic that it handles, it's a very, very significant arterial roadway.
So since we had worked on that core study, we did another study. This was high, the previous study was pretty high level, had some concepts in here, but we looked at this segment of the 42 study was between 118 to the east to the county line. At the time, Burnsville was planning to build the 6-lane segment from the county line east. We were looking at what our traffic needs were and then kind of that long range plan in this area. So we had some recommendations come out of it. One was to continue to work on our projects that we had been planning at 13 and other locations. We actually set up through this to preserve a recommendation of a 6-lane segment long term. And we've been slowly working towards that, is preserving right away as development has been coming in. If you look by the right of way around 42 and 27, that kind of northern, the north part that had recently developed over the years, we were reserving right away through those developments for future expansion if needed. And then I think overall it really got into what are some of those immediate needs and what are some long range needs here. And so we had the 13 and 42 initially intersection looked at as a 6-lane. We were able to kind of through the study look at how to preserve it and set it up for that future 6-lane by getting the right away we needed, get it in the right spot, set that southern curb line for that future expansion if ever needed. So one of the objectives going back to the initial study with Dakota County was our travel speeds on the 42 corridor. We had a 40-mile-an-hour target in that initial study. This is kind of a little bit of hard graph to read, but the green was the initial travel speeds per segments back in 1996. The blue was the speed in that same corridor in 2015. Yellow is 2024. And the hatched line, the striped line, was back in 1996, what it was projected to be in 2020 without improvements corridor. So as both Scott County and Dakota County and our partners have been improving this corridor and making improvements, whether it's been signal optimization or doing some improvements like at 13, we've been able to beat, I guess, the projection of having those speeds stay above that 40-mile-an-hour for most of the segments. The one segment where it does not meet that objective is on the far east end of the county. So that's something that we've raised it from 1996 in this area, but maybe it's worth additional study.
I gotta tell you, this chunk of road, I think Reno is the biggest little city in the world, but that stretch of road, 42, got relatives, AP, just trying to get 35E capital. I always called that the longest road in the state back in the day. Now there have been times when I've actually made it from Jaco PL all the way to 35E on ramp without having to stop. I couldn't believe it. And that's happens. Now, it doesn't happen every time where you actually get the green turn too, but it is such a game changer. It's such a game changer.
I've been on at 3 in the morning too, and it's been.
Well, no. This is not 3 in the morning. This is like primo driving time. I'm like, holy.
So I was gonna say, Tony, kudos to you and your coordination, if it's Mark and John and with Dakota, because Brad and I had to go over for a solid piece, which was, 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. and I drove all the way from 17. I had to slow down at 27 and I had to slow down at 5. But other than that, I made it through the entire system coordinated.
The Opticon could help you out on that probably. too.
I did not have.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really
I,
nice.
I think, I mean, I know this graph's kind of busy, but if you look at that and just pick out both sides of 13 in there, so kind of in the middle there from 18 to 13 and then 13 to 27, without improvements in the corridor, it was predicted that travel speeds would be about 20 miles an hour. Looking back then, all the traffic growth in that area, all the access along there, and then you look at what it actually is today, it's a significant improvement for lots of different reasons. Projects along the corridor, adding capacity, operations at intersections, reduced access just in that area from 18 to 27, if you're looking in that area. Reduce direct access, full movement access in several locations, which add to mobility, add to safety improvements along that corridor. And average speeds that were predicted to be at 20 miles an hour are now 45, 50 miles an hour. So they're at design speeds, you know, so, and then signal coordination. We've made a lot of advancements with interconnection and signal operations along the corridor. So, and part of that is coordinating with Dakota County as well. So, you know, I think graph is really telling.
And the 40 mile an hour was set by the Metro Region as a target for 42 based on what they felt through rush hours was a reasonable speed for Spartan. So that's where the 40 miles an hour, it goes way back to some early data. I don't even know if they still have that in effect, but it was what people felt they should be able to move at, right? And when you're in the suburbs, mobility is important. And so that was why that target speed was set.
One more comment on the signal coordination. We spotlighted that in the most recent issue of the Scene. So if you haven't had a chance to look that up, inside you'll see an article hitting the same point you're making, Commissioner.
It's so smooth. I mean, I used to take the back door out to get up to 35 and go up, you know, but now it's like 42 is not perfect, right? It's you still have to stop from time to time, but it's safe and it's a real option.
Yeah.
And talking about volumes, I mean, those are obviously our busiest intersections. 13 and 42 is our busiest at-grade intersection in the county. 42 at 27, just to the east, our next busiest at-grade intersection. Some of these others that used to be 13 at the 101 and 169 area, that grade separation now. The 41 interchange now, those used to be. And so significant improvements there. So we're managing these at-grade facilities right now. There's a lot of other areas all around the state that these would be grade separated, and that would be great at some point in the future, but managing them as at-grade systems right now, I think they're going pretty well right now, considering the improvements that we made out there.
And yeah, we did all this work to extend the life of the roadway. As more development occurs and more traffic uses this as projected, I mean, there might be a time that we need to do some other investment in the corridor, but it is really kind of helping us have our investments in other locations as well.
And maybe to that point, and Commissioner Ulrich's point earlier about the impact of these principal arterial roadways, people aren't probably going to remember snaking through their neighborhood and maybe how long it took to go a half mile through the neighborhood. But if they get on 42 and it's not efficient, they're surely going to remember that, and they're going to pick up the phone and call. So our investments in corridors like that have a great impact.
Well, I mean, just in general, I know we're talking about different things, but the roadway system in this county is pretty awesome. I mean, you go to different states, different jurisdictions, even within the state, different states, different counties within different states. And our turn lanes, all of those things, you know, we get trails on both sides, which I know some. But anyway, pretty awesome, you know, especially when I had new drivers. Yes, there was those certain intersections where you're like, I don't know what it is, it doesn't mean orange, doesn't whatever, but it's just a Bermuda Triangle, and we've dealt with a lot of those things, but like this moves really, really well. We have really, really good roads. Sure, there's not many. And it drives me nuts that somehow we're, what are we, the third deadliest roadway system in the state? Which I know we need to talk about that.
It's not the county highway system necessarily. And remember, crashes are random. So
They are.
That's the next work session.
Yeah, because it's just like, no, these roads are good. People are distracted in other things, like. Anyway, I know that's not I'm glad we're gonna talk about that. They're pretty awesome.
All right, let's talk about 17 and the 17 corridor and study and evolution and projects along this roadway. Let's first begin with kind of the evolution of 17, and I want to just pick out one segment, and I know a few of you have seen something similar to this in the past maybe, but if we look at the evolution in this just 1 mile segment, and we talked about the importance of 42 as a principal arterial and 17 as well. So if we look at this segment in 1957 to today, and go ahead and, so here's 1957, obviously very rural. There's 8 private driveways out there, very, field access, residential, farmland. And then we move up to 1970. Okay, we've added another access point. There's about 1,500 vehicles a day out here, still very rural. Not a lot has changed, but things are going to change pretty quickly. So we go to 1980. Okay, we've now doubled the number of access points. Okay, so now we've got 16, and traffic's around 2,000 vehicles a day on the roadway. And then we go 10 years later to 1990. Okay, now we've got 18 access points. We've added a few. Our ADT is about just 5,800 vehicles a day. And we're that earlier I mentioned that cartoon figure that Brad had up, and I said, remember this figure. So you can start to see over the last couple decades, the proliferation of the number of access points, and it's starting to look like that. And then we go to 2000. Okay, now we've got 21 access points. We've tripled the traffic volume out there, so pretty significant. We've added a couple city streets to the network out there, still have the same number of private drive accesses. We haven't removed any of those, and yet now we're adding streets out there amongst all of this. Then we go to 2008, again, 21 access points, traffic volumes in that 13 to 14,000 vehicles a day. And now we've got some safety problems out there. The density and the number of access points along a roadway has a very significant correlation to safety on a roadway. If you go from 10 access points to 20 access points, you can expect about a 30% increases in crashes on the roadway, statistically. So it's a pretty big jump. And then you put that on a high-speed roadway, higher traffic volumes to handle traffic like that on a lane roadway without turn lanes. You got insufficient shoulders now. You've got ditch sections, run off the road conditions that aren't too standard to handle that type of traffic, that type of constant interaction between people getting on and off the roadway, and you end up with safety problems out there. So that's kind of that evolution, over several decades getting to that point. And so it's at this 2008 timeframe, okay, in coordination with the comp plan that was going on, so was a corridor study on Trunk Highway 17/13. So this important north-south roadway across the heart of the county. So this is a 19-mile segment from the river crossing in 101 east to 17, down 17, and down to Highway 19 just east of New Prague. So numerous agencies involved between the city of Shakopee and Prior Lake, Cedar Lake and Spring Lake townships, and different segments of that. So there was 6 different segments that were studied because they're all in a different, some are very urban, some are urbanizing, and some are very rural. And so they all have different characteristics in what those are. From we're ready for projects right now, we're managing intersections, some are in expansion, and then others in the rural area are simply right-of-way preservation and making sure that we have our eye on the ball as far as, I think Brad talked earlier about plats and zoning and lot splits and things like that. So we're ensuring we don't end up with that cartoon figure and what I showed was happening up in the north, that we're more intuitive as things develop further to the south and preserving that for future conditions. Okay.
I just want to make a note. I know
Yeah.
a lot of focus recently has been on the segment in Shakopee, and we're going to talk more about that. But even this month now, we're looking at a plat at Lydia for a rural business park. And we're definitely keeping this corridor study in mind and making sure that that new plat builds the first part of a frontage road that can serve then other development around Lydia instead of any direct access onto 13. So we're implementing these corridor studies in a lot of different ways.
So in this area, in that 1 mile segment, and then further to the north some, we had 3 projects in a 5-6 year period from, and including 42 up to County Road 16 by the hospital. The first one was the grade separation of 17 and 42. And this was a big impact, and I'll get into that in 1 second here. And then to the north of that was a 4-lane divided roadway from a 2-lane rural section roadway. So significant improvements in mobility, safety, access management, multimodal trails along the roadway. Of those 21 access points that I mentioned earlier, we removed 18 access points, including public streets. So we worked with the city, we created a frontage road system, so all those neighborhoods can get to the signalized intersection up at County Road 78. So there's different ways to get in and out of those neighborhoods with a focus on 17 as a principal arterial, with mobility as the focus of that, and safety improvements. We had numerous crashes on that roadway because it really was substandard for the traffic volume that it was handling, the number of access points along that roadway. So very significant improvements along that stretch. So looking at this 42-17 intersection in particular, so this was constructed in the 2010-11 timeframe. The 5 years prior to that, there were 3 fatal crashes, numerous injury crashes. And after that, you can go to the next slide maybe. You can see we've averaged about a crash or so a year since that time. And the left side of that screen, that purple line on the bottom is your crash rate. And the blue line up above is your severity rate. So when you have great separation between those two, it's a weighted value. So it represents that you have more injury crashes when you have greater separation like that. And you can see on the right-hand side, we're averaging a very low number. Property damage primarily might be a very low-end type C type crash, but significant improvements from a safety standpoint and surely improved mobility along the corridor through this intersection.
We don't have 25 data yet.
No. I'm suspecting it'll look very similar to these here.
Me too.
This is one of them that when we talked to folks out there, Tony and John went back and put the full history in. It really shows what we were facing at that time. And the board actually, for this project, it was such a big issue, decided to bond for it. It is one of the projects we bonded for in that 2000. To make sure this move forward on this, and federal, was it ARA money at the time? Like,
Yeah.
Didn't it, Tony, have like the highest benefit cost project we did?
I believe so. Yeah.
This always feels like, I remember when I first came online, one of the former mayors, oh, this project and that, it should have been this, should have been that. And we look into it, but the reality is data shows that I know there's some value engineering to shorten this and that to save some money, but the reality is that is a much safer intersection.
The solution for this and the improvements in the entire interaction between those two roadways, it used to be a 4-legged intersection. Now it's a 2. There is a southbound right turn on the west side, but the fatals and the serious injury crashes, they all involved the same movement. That was a westbound left turn and getting hit by a northbound vehicle. So we've effectively grade separated that movement in which all of these injury crashes happened. And you see that result on the statistics.
All right, we'll spotlight the third and final corridor study, Andy.
Yeah, so in the 2013, 2014 timeframe, I believe it was, we did a study on County Highway 27. And as you can kind of see here, this is one of the few north-south arterials that goes from the southern border all the way to the northern edge. pretty close at least. And so, this is a minor arterial, but we really treated it as a kind of principal arterial light. It is the only really continuous north-south between the 13 and 17 corridor to the west and then I-35, I-35W to the east there. So you can go to the next slide. This was broken up into 4 different segments based on, just like how the 17 was, kind of more urban built environment to the north, and then kind of the urbanizing, developing areas and segments B and C, and then the more rural area. And so in particular, segment B, which was between Highway 21 and 44 in the Credit River area, was at capacity as a 2-lane rural roadway. And a lot of the outcome of this was to do that initial concept layout to look at what would be needed to improve that, which was then constructed in the 2022 timeframe, I believe.
So Craig, I just said that because I think you might have been here. But the city of Savage on their own built the alignment to the north instead of that old convoluted portion. Remember, they built that new alignment and then they took back even those old weird pieces of part of 27. Otherwise, we would not have had some of that roadway constructed. That was a city decision.
Yeah, I wasn't here at the time, but I had saw some documentation. There was an initial study that set that all up as well.
Correct, yeah.
So,
But it was some old zigzaggy pieces over by Hy-Vee and some of that. And the city on their own dime and their own review, you probably sure, actually built that and then turned that over. We turned back the old road to the city. So that was again a partnership in planning that set up a really good corridor.
They didn't want a single intersection of 42.
So we had I think they called it a project management team, which consisted of township officials, city staff and officials, county staff, and met for a year and a half, 2 years on this, looking at different segments and analyzing these, and then spent a lot of time looking at the concept layout for that piece from Cleary Lake to the north up to Highway 44 and Savage there. And other areas we looked at, we did kind of, again, kind of go through the process. What are the existing needs, the future capacity issues, the safety issues? What's the right of way needs that would be for this to preserve that corridor, especially as it develops to the south? We worked a lot on that layout, and that really facilitated the next project that happened as the county then, it was probably around 2017, 18 that we started to go through that preliminary final design, and it got constructed in 21, 22. This really set the stage for that, where those access points should be. We had a lot of public involvement, so the fact that the timing of this was closer, it probably helped facilitate some of those conversations. People knew, helped define where those access points are, because there were some local road changes that did happen with this project as well. So hopefully that helps set that stage to make that transition a little bit easier for them, a little bit better. And then really focused on access management plan and how we can continue some supporting road networks. The plan also then had recommendations for some improvements over the next 20 years, either be safety or asset needed. And so a couple examples of that looked at Highway 8 and 27, that intersection at some point a roundabout is recommended for that area. So what are those future, as changes continue to occur, what are those potential options that we can further evaluate as we move forward? And then also really, as we went to the north, it was also looking at that sidewalk trail connections and making those complete and helping build that out, because that is the county systems in particular, as you get into the Savage and the city's areas, those are really important to the city connections, the city's trail systems. And then one more corridor just to highlight was County Highway 8. So there's actually been a few different studies that have happened in this area. in 2011 and 10, or no, excuse me, 2011, 2012 timeframe, we did a study from Highway 21, Trunk Highway 21 to the east. So the existing alignment, and really kind of set that stage that this is a future principal arterial. That created quite a concern for the area. So we did a lot of public involvement. We did a similar thing where we had a study management team consisting of township officials, staff, and also included residents that were concerned with that area. So they went with us through the whole process. And it really helped define what a principal arterial could be in this corridor. Doesn't mean it's a 4-lane, doesn't mean it's, 42, you're just imprinting down here, but what does that mean in a rural context? We helped define that and then implemented that in the segment that was then constructed, was it from around County Highway 91 to the east to the county line there. So that really helped set the trail or the definition of what that corridor, that layout would look like. And then kind of then looked at other right-of-way needs, access management, all that kind of stuff, sidewalk trail connections as you go to the west to define what that corridor will be long-term. And then other studies that have occurred is as you go west of Highway 21, which is the future extension. So there's been a couple different studies to look at what those alignment alternatives could be. That's really going to set the stage for the next work as it is programmed in the tip to get reconstructed in the future. And these will help set that stage and start that conversation. And again, tying it all together to help as that work is going on, those conversations are going, how it fits into the bigger all corridor, ties to the east, how we can make those system connections and what kind of benefits can go along with that.
All right, thanks, Andy. So we've taken you through that kind of that big picture transportation planning, and we've narrowed it down to the corridors. We've showcased what that work looks like, focusing on corridors. From that, we typically identify specific road improvement projects, and we start putting them in the tip that you see every year, and we present on, and you approve that tip. So now let's talk about delivering those specific road projects. What are the different roles and responsibilities? So the county staff certainly plays an important role in delivering these road projects. It's demonstrated you have all the technical expertise here in staff. You have a lot of local knowledge, lay of the land, kind of the decision makers, who to engage with. The staff is managing the consultants. Most of our projects do bring in consultants, and so it's just managing the work that they do. It's that quality assurance, quality control of the work. It's liaisons to you and providing updates to you on these projects, but also to the township boards or city councils or state aid, managing the funding and leading that community engagement. So those we feel are kind of what the staff's core roles and responsibilities are. As I mentioned, oftentimes we bring on consultants and they bring expertise that we might not have in-house, or just help us with our workload management. If we have a year where we're taking on quite a few projects, we want to bring in some of that additional talent here through the consultants. They bring their own kind of knowledge from different work across the region and state that often can help improve our projects. They really have focused skills on design and CAD work, so we lean on the consultants a lot for that. We lean on our consultants for a lot of the graphics and poster boards. So when you've attended open houses, you're typically seeing products on display that come from our consultants, and ultimately doing a lot of the documentation or this preparing the studies and reports. Now, like I said earlier, let's talk about your role as the county commissioner. From our perspective, your biggest role is supporting that project vision and need. Again, hopefully through your experience with either the corridor study or the transportation plan or through the TIP, you're supportive of the project itself. You understand how it fits into that larger vision. We see you as the sounding board for the neighborhood and the business community. We know at a staff level, often residents are comfortable coming to you and calling you and providing their thoughts and concerns and comments. And we know that you then bring that back to us at the staff level. We know that your role is to listen to those concerns. And then on a very specific action, we know that you are ultimately going to approve any right-of-way acquisitions that are needed, all of the contracts related to the project, so you see the evolution of these projects on your board agendas. But I'll pause here because I want to get your impression of all of these roles and responsibilities, if you as commissioners see things a little bit different.
Well, this is always the fun part of the job, right? 17, for example, you got a couple roundabouts that I don't think many people can argue with. There's some serious safety issues out there. I'm just using that as an example. And with transportation and engineering, which we're not, and so I get that. It's just a matter of like, Mike always used to say, we're kind of that rubber that, interim between what happens at the government center, what happens out in the neighborhoods. And so we do hear, not that you guys don't get calls, you probably get some calls. But trying to find where those lines intersect. Safety, yes. The county engineer, you can make that call, you get the veto power, right? Have you ever used that?
People are usually in agreement when there's
Yeah.
a safety issue and,
Yeah.
yeah, something's gotta happen.
Yeah. So it's just more of the communications. How is this best? Some of these more contentious, the right word, I don't know, projects. How do we communicate that in a way that people actually see? You're right. Seeing it. I did read that, by the way. Leslie said that was a great article as well. In the age of newspapers dwindling, the social media, bigger, but also more jaded in some different things. How do we best communicate that just beyond our staff and city staff and township staff, government type jurisdictions? I know in some cities they're putting those signs at the end of a road that looks like it. I had one by my house several years ago. My kid, like, what are they doing? It's just future. Like, you can see the cutout of a future cul-de-sac. That's an ever-present reminder. I know it's different than some of the things we're doing, but how do we best roll that out in a way that I know covers safety, but it is also to sorts and getting that information out to the people that are busy living lives. That's the big trick and communications down here. But how do we, the collective we, if you've got a job to do, and I know sometimes we've been to those open houses and they're spicy, and some are just like you need this open house. So how do we balance that, but also get out in front of some of these things and communicate them in a way that gives people a voice beyond studies that might have been done 10, 20 years ago, and try to find some common ground and still have an engineering say that safety makes so much sense in some of these areas. And also the nuance, right? Nuance to every project. What nuance can we add or track to projects to make it still safe, but also give people a voice?
Yeah, when I look at the board that's up here, I think what's missing in here is the community and what their voice is. And I agree that safety is always paramount, but it is also I work for this, I work for the community and I work for the people of the community. But I think their voice is missing from this. When I look back at like the notification that went back out to the community, it said, we're having these open houses. We want to hear what you have to say, but it didn't feel like it. And I don't think that the community felt like they were being heard. So I think that's where I struggle, because not having the community voice listed here is, that's who we work for, so.
And this is a fresh topic, right? So because that whole concept, we had 2 or 3 open houses, 17, well attended. I thought there was really, really good discussion. And I was always saying, hey, make sure you fill out this little comment card or whatever, like a little white card. And I thought our folks did a really good job of like, hey, here's the why. And yes, we need to listen, but also we need to convey the why as well. I had a lot of those, hard discussions where it's like, yeah, you can raise kids on a busy road. I did it. So representing the why of these projects, but also at the same time, that nuance of what are we hearing, what things can be done, because some things were changed as a result of those open houses. So there's the open house with the comment cards. But then there was comments made, I don't remember exactly, but in either a workshop setting or something like it where, well, no, it's not for comment. These open houses, we're telling you what's happening. It's like, well, wait a minute, like we're having this open house. We actually have somebody at a booth or a table handing out and collecting comment cards. So if we're not listening, what's the point of that? And then what's the point of even having the open house then? So they do have a voice. These studies have been done, but a lot of things change. A lot of things stay the same too. I mean, so both can be simultaneously true. But again, I think it comes down to that nuance of what things have changed, what things might change versus what the study says. And are we able to have that discernment and build some of that nuance into these projects that still accomplish safety? We don't want to sacrifice safety. Well, what if we came in this way or that way? Okay, maybe some of that stuff is nuance that can be added to projects, and giving them that voice. And I always tell people, like, look, the answer still may be no, but we're at least gonna have a better chance of telling you the why. I'm a why guy, I like the why, versus just like, no, we're not doing it. So just because people have voice doesn't mean everything's gonna change. Things might not be able to change statutorily or just functionally or engineering, I don't know. But having the why to be able to explain that no or yes is super powerful.
So I know that public voice is on your mind, so I'm skipping a few slides. We'll go back to the city's role, but yeah, I think I wanted to spend time just talking about this, that public input and what is our format and when are we truly looking for input and when aren't we? I know that's been discussed. So I'll start by just saying, I think this is a concept that most of us here on this side have been trained in, this idea of informed consent and trying to work through the public, not only on roadway projects, but trail projects and controversial land use projects, and just a lot of things where you have really upset residents. That first is, hey, let's recognize there's a serious problem that needs to be addressed. And usually on a highway project, it's safety is the most serious problem. And it could be congestion, it could be other things, but start by getting to some agreement that there is a serious problem, getting to an agreement that the county, in most of the projects that obviously we're leading and are funded, we're the right entity to address that problem. And I think that parentheses is important, just to kind of subtly hint that if we don't address this problem, that's actually more irresponsible than the arguments that we're having right now about what we're going to do about it. Our approach is reasonable, sensible, responsible. Those are three words that hopefully are the common themes when we're talking to residents. And that fourth one too, we're listening. We care, but we still got to address this problem. Anyways, that's just some kind of foundational training that I think a lot of us in the public work that we do try to work through as we deal with difficult open houses and situations. Yep, go ahead. We call it the Bliker
It might
life.
be helpful if you were to generically, not tied to a project, highlight where you expect conflicts. There's a conflict always between mobility and access. There's a conflict between what I said and exactly what I said. There's conflict. If you don't do exactly what I said, you didn't hear me. Well, that's not true. That's not true in relationships. That's not true in highway projects. I mean, you can hear something clearly and say, no, it doesn't work. So, I mean, so it would be, but what I'm trying to say, it might be helpful to describe going into any project, where could be the dynamics of or differences.
Good.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
appreciate that. I think I agree with Jody and Dave, but like, I think we all, me as a person, as a representative, but also our communications, our little pamphlets go out. We can do better being very clear. Like if we're just gonna listen and care, but that's where the line stops. We almost need to say that. Like, we really don't want their input, do we? In that case, if we're just listening and care, there's nothing, Like, I think we need to be a little more clear and like I said, me first, I need to be more clear on it because I haven't been. And, you know, it's 9, 10 years or whatever. And, I look at community engagement a little bit differently than these definitions and we need to get on the same page.
I think it's input into what, right? And that's the difference. So quite often we'll talk about, here's the issue, we have to make interconnections. So this corridor study, it started with 4 lanes, didn't it? Between 282. We looked at the volumes, we looked at the land use changes. We're still acquiring that. We narrowed up the road, put in roundabouts instead of overpasses like 42 has. So trying not to build the best all the time, right? But what is it that will work in the short term? And so once that design is done, the input is, are we missing something with a slope that might get into a septic system? Are we missing something in some trees? Are we able to change or alter some things that might help a property owner mitigate something, but maybe not the design, right, Commissioner? So I think it depends where
Right.
you are.
I
even
hear
in the
that.
project.
I hear that, but most of the time we're engaged when we're pretty late in the project and we're going to these open houses. And I don't think we were looking, I mean, it'd be very rare for somebody to be, oh, the input is on my septic might be like they're,
You'd be
no, but I mean,
surprised.
that's not the first on their mind when they're coming with a whole different type of input. At least in every, you know, open house I've been involved in. But again, my experience is limited and maybe somebody should have said, like, I haven't been doing you any help with how I've been explaining these open houses and input. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Conflict, I want to come back, thank you. Conflict of perspective. Your perspective might be mobility and safety. Somebody else's might be economic development and convenience. So you have to recognize where the conflict is. And you're not perfect. These public hearings will make the project better. You'll hear things, oh, we didn't really take that into full consideration. We will, got to do that. Got to modify this. That happens, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Yes.
I would say most look at an open house and they come in as, how am I immediately impacted? I don't want change to begin with.
Yeah.
I think everything's fine. I don't want change.
For sure.
Yep, but not recognizing outside of your immediate zone area, getting out of your neighborhood, getting kind of where you want to go. Everything else that's happened, you know, in other areas, you know, how 169 has been built. First of all, it's like we were the fastest growing, once 169 opened in the late 90s, we were the fastest growing county in the state for a decade and a half. I think Carver County is maybe the fastest right now, but for a long time, because of that convenience. So a lot of people were able to move down here. And now when that growth has continued to happen, now I'm impacted with the next project. Well, I don't want that anymore. You know, not recognizing that there's been other sacrifices elsewhere on my journey, no matter where I'm going. And boy, it's convenient to be down here in Scott County right now because I can get anywhere. 42, up 17, 169, wherever that is, it's pretty convenient because a lot of things have happened. So there's immediate conflict with that, I think, that is hard to recognize in these projects. And all of our projects are safety. I don't care what the project is. You know, when we have pavement preservation projects, it's also a safety project. So anything that we do is a safety component of all of our projects. Now, granted, other projects, they are, you know, we've got an intersection crash problem, you know, whatever that is, those are like immediate that people would recognize. Yeah, there's crashes out there, but so there's safety components in all of that. But I think people foremost want to know how they are individually impacted. And so the communication is both ways. We want to hear that for sure, but we also try to, you know, we try to talk about, you know, here's the 17 project that was completed in 2009. And to really go through this and, you know, everybody agreed to, this is what we're going to build out and here's why. And so to help with that education piece as well. And a lot of it's uncomfortable conversations when it immediately impacts them. So it is the difficult part of the job we do.
Yep.
And I think there is a lot of areas that, yeah, we can make improvements out there in communicating how that is. You know, maybe it's getting out there earlier. I think it was brought up earlier. It's like, well, you know, people aren't coming unless it's like, it affects me like right now. If it's 2 miles down the road,
Right.
I'm not going to that one, you know? So it is hard to get that information out there on a regular basis. You know, so trying to communicate this with the cities and townships, there are agencies out there that, you know, this is coming, it's in our program, we're moving toward that. We now have a project in our program, not just the study, but we actually have a project that's gonna hit the ground in 5 years. And so making sure, you know, and those people are part of our project management teams. When we get into the start of projects and through design, we're including our agency partners that are involved in these projects so they can help carry that message as well. You know, but still the point of open houses it's difficult.
Yes, I just want to talk to this slide for just a second. So this is staff and the consultants that we work with usually recommend for the major projects to have the 3 open houses. Your first one is probably the most of that Bliker informed consent. Hey, there's a serious problem. We're the right entity to do this. We want to listen, or we want to identify and let you know what the problem is, how it's part of the bigger vision, and listen. Follow that up with that second open house where you're starting to actually come with your poster boards of some concepts, some designs, status update. Here's where we are in the project. And I think gets to what Leslie was saying. Now let's talk about your specific property. If there's some impact to this concept and design, whether it's slopes or septic or you have chickens in the backyard. These are the issues now that we're starting to zero in on in that second open house, and then come back with a third. Here's the final design. We're moving forward. Here's the timeline. This is like best practice. And I know it doesn't always go this smoothly and in this nice sequence, but I think this is our goal when rolling out these bigger projects. But to Commissioner Weckman's point, maybe we need to be a little more intentional in those invitations. What the purpose of is the first, the second, or third, what is the purpose here, and maybe do a better job setting expectations.
This is the route, right? I mean, until people care, they don't care.
Right.
And we get that. I mean, I think that's in the nature of things. But that can't also just be and I'm not suggesting that it is, but like, well, it's backyard. So we don't need to do anything. I'm not suggesting we're not doing that. But it also, it's like, well, it's incumbent upon us to try to do something a little bit more. You know, because there was comments, well, we had this on our website. True, but most people aren't out digging through this stuff. Yes, there's personal responsibility, you know, if you're moving into something, but a lot of these folks live there. So I don't know what the right answer is. I just kind of know what it's not. So the more communications that we can do, besides just having it, because a lot of times it's usually buried, but it's buried in the website someplace. Unless we're doing a big project and then the project website gets stood up by the consultant, and then that's even sort of a different lane. We've done that speak up, speak out, whatever. You know, other neighborhood social media things, I don't know. There's can be annoying in and of themselves because, you know, lost cats can be fine. You just kind of dismiss them, you know, when something important comes, like, whatever. But I just feel like more is better than less. So there's that part of it. And then just going back to the open houses again, it was most recent because of 17, you know, I was telling people, hey, get your comment card. And there were comments later here like, well, no, not. We're telling them what's going to happen. Well, what's the point? Then don't even do a comment card, you know, which kind of says somebody's going to read them. But I said, we're reading these. I think, Tony, you've said one of those meetings, we read all these things. So I know that we do, but if the intent is not to listen, and again, sometimes the answer is no. That's fine, as long as there's a reason, and then you can help explain the why. But if we're not going to listen, then why even go through the exercise?
Well, I think we always listen. I just don't think we change, but I'd rather not have comment cards if if we're not going to change anything. And sometimes I'm trying to find examples, but we're like, we want your input, share. I think we need to be, to Brad's point, very specific. If the purpose of an open house is to present what's happening, let's be clear about it and not be like, we want your input in like the tagline and title of our communications.
We we truly do want their input. And when we go to these open houses, we do listen, we do take down that information. We've had several different formats, so we have done presentations for open house too. And what we found is you do a presentation and you got two people in the audience that just dominate questions and answers. And somebody else is sitting in the corner going, I didn't even get to like talk or anything. So we found actually that providing as much information and enough people there to talk about the project, listen to them directly, and really engage in one-on-one conversations. Because a lot of people won't speak out in a big setting. So we have predominantly gone to that, and I think they have been successful in that regard. And we have a ton of boards and things like that to really kind of delve in and get into, here's how we got to where we are right now. And now we're looking for your input. And I always tell people, it's like, you live and drive this every single day. We've got a pretty good idea what's going on, hence the project, but you live and drive it every single day. I do want to hear from you and understand the impacts and what you're going through. So we do want that. And I always encourage them, you don't even have to fill out the card here, bring it home, email us, call us, whatever you want after you have thought about being at the open house, whatever that is.
But it also doesn't mean you're gonna change the
Correct.
design.
Yeah,
That-
it's input.
That's where the rub is.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go to Pipe Lake Trail. That is a decision he could make based on just safety and probably not gonna change it from a 3/4. But it doesn't mean they don't wanna listen to
Right.
what those impacts are, or are there some things we can think about in the design? But it's probably not gonna change his decision from a 3/4.
Well, in that particular open house, I was there, toward these, and there was a couple there that just, it didn't matter what, just, I'd rather have you blockade, down at the, like, well, it's not gonna happen. This is a safety issue. There's a safety issue, and yes, you might need to backtrack out, go down towards the holiday or whatever, but. So, yeah, I mean, big 17, our guys were getting hammered, like, hey, they're not listening, they're not doing this, like, look how you're coming at them. Like, you're coming in with pitchforks, you're coming in hot.
Like a threat to hurt them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I
a
mean-
natural, just a human nature of like, oh, so let's be conversational, let's be respectful. Yeah, I want to hear. I guess in that one, it was just a weird rub about the comment cards. Like, so that we've talked about that, so we want to come back.
And I guess I agree, I see all this, but I go into Ruby's or I go whenever, and this is not what the general people think. So we have a disconnect of even people who we work with a lot. So I'm just bringing up, like, let's fix the disconnect. I'm not saying let's change our
Go back to
whatever.
your flanker slide. To me, this is when it hit home with me, however many years ago when you go through this. It gets down to it's informed consent. Doesn't mean there's consensus on it, but people understand why you're doing it. They don't have to agree with you. And maybe 80% of the people right along 7 don't agree with us, but at least they understand why we're doing it. And it's not a vote of, we got this many comment cards for this or that.
Yeah.
And that's where we can help each other, I think, in this discussion.
Yes.
I agree, but it's not, I'm like, let's figure out how to
And
make
we
it
will
better.
work on the
Yeah.
communication of those.
And, we can too. And I would bring up, let's look at that term informed consent, because I think since this model was made, that term is used in very different contexts in government for a lot of the work we do. Informed consent legally means somebody consented, they had all the information and consented. So I do think we might want to change, like, it doesn't mean it's in many of our
You're going to a
programs. Yeah,
legal concern.
but yeah,
We're
but
just
no, in all
going-
our human service programs, we use it,
But
we gotta
we're-
not
but
use it.
that's-
Yeah.
But this is what it really was about. It's people understand why, and it's okay to move it forward. And you're not gonna have consensus, and that's okay.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not looking for consensus. I'm looking for people to say, I don't agree, but I understand why they're doing it. And I haven't been getting that. And some of it's our culture, the partisanship, the world, but it's
the word.
harder to get there. I never hear that anymore.
Yeah, and I also want to double down, like the open houses, especially the spicy ones. I mean, I've been to the, where we're, 17 roll open house, Public Works, all of these days. I've been where that thing is just, it was spicy. And I thought our folks, with our internal folks, our consultants, did awesome. Like we're trying to handle, every easel was, had somebody there and talking to them, and So I love that. I thought it was great. I thought there were some really good outcomes from that. Just the comment card was a little weird and just the disconnect potentially looking into, but I've also been on that same corridor, same building, same open house structure where I walked in and it was a herd of Scott County folks and consultants. And water stacked to the ceiling, maybe not to the ceiling, but no one was there. Because it was just such an obvious, and probably a little bit smaller project. But I've also been to the one with Pike Lake, and I have a friend that lives in that area, and he was there. Oh, the thing, people read it maybe through their own lens, or missed a word, or we can maybe do better in how it's formatted. I'm not sure what the problem was, but he came there. Oh, we can get out the other way. No problem. So my, hey, can you tell this couple over here, because they went to blockade and they got earth from somebody that didn't tear up the pavement. It's like, oh, we just have to go the other way? Yeah, perfect, sounds good. Thanks for the cake.
I know that the projects are listed on the tip, but I also think it would be beneficial before holding an open house that a meeting with the commissioner, so that we can be either the champion, or we can say, I think you're going to get pushback here, or we can go in and be your champion. We can say we support you, and we can respond to the people that are there, and I mean, it's on the tip, and it's like, there's still that planning that's going on and things. So I think that would be
Thanks for all the
beneficial.
work it's a lot. It's not easy, highway, always in someone's front yard or backyard. But yes, the more we can be that shock absorber and understand and be a mouthpiece as well. I think we are, but it's just thoughts.
Your suggestion, I think, we haven't done a lot of big projects in a lot of years. We've been focused on some other areas, right? And so I think that's something, we used to have a lot more transportation work sessions, if I go back in history and think through it. And so you were more aware of some of those projects. I've taken your note, a couple other notes. We'll bring that back at the next one, but we promised to have you out of here about 12:30 today. So we have session 2 in transportation in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And so 2 items here that I had added to the agenda because it just came late Friday afternoon. Commissioner Ulrich saw it. I'd like to recommend that we sign on to this letter. This has to do with HCMC, and Hennepin County cites some facts, right? We know that 40% of the patients who receive trauma are especially burn care from outside of the county. So they are really, really important to the state of Minnesota from their trauma and from the burn unit. We also know that they train like half of our doctors in the state of Minnesota. In fact, when we were in Washington chatting about this, Wright County talked about how important it was from a burn unit for somebody like Wright County. So it's bigger even than the metro. What Hennepin County is asking for is support to be able to extend their target field sales tax to actually help raise revenue to keep the Hennepin County Medical Center operating. And they're asking for the support of the 6 other metro counties right now. This would be a letter, my understanding, that the 6 other chairs would sign and that we would forward to the legislature and to Hennepin County in support of HCMC. There's also some data here that just talks about HCMC. There were years, and I think Gary and Dave were probably the administrators, and I don't think I've seen one, where Hennepin County actually requested funding from us, and we continued to say no. But I think right now, from everything I can follow, from what I've heard from Jody, they are really in a crisis right now with the funding at HCMC. Loss of that facility would be huge to the state. And this is potentially a way forward for them to fund some of their needs. I know Commissioner Brecky, you were in some conversation.
I think this really hit home to me when I was at Session Priorities and Monty Johnson, our hospital, was talking to Ben Bakeberg and explaining the issue. And Monty talked about what a fiscal hit it would be to St. Francis if HCMC closed down, plus just the fact that they use them for help all the time. But, I think the stats in here, HCMC's payer mix is like, 70% Medicare and Medicaid. And because hospitals lose dollars on every single Medicare and Medicaid patient, it's a volume issue. They're not, I know there's been some concern just in that last day or so that by us counties signing this is the same, we want to, have a metro sales tax or something like that. At least everything I've heard from Hennepin County is they're just asking to, their ballpark sales tax rolling off, say, keep it on, use it for this. Kevin Anderson told the AMC board, Commissioner Kevin Anderson, that they are pretty sure if they don't get this passed this session, HCMC will close this summer, because that's just how bad now with all the windows are. So, I know, the president of the hospital, Amy Dirty, sent an email to all of us today because she said she saw this, that we were talking about this, about that they very much, everybody wants HCMC to stay open. So based on that, like I said, Monty to Ben was and Ben asked great questions because he wasn't in that thought either. It was very, it changed my mind on it for sure.
The only thing, and I haven't had no problem signing this, but I think Schulte's concerned, Oklahoma County Commissioner Schulte was concerned that what if they say no to this and then they come back and say, no, you're right. The 7 counties do need to contribute to this hospital. We're going to enact a way that you will pay for it. That's his concern. And they, it's a valid concern because they've asked for us to pay past 7 counties. So, but I don't have a problem. I think we should sign it. But there's a monitoring concern.
Right. No, I think it's fair, but I think if we think about it, it'd have to be a legislative decision. I would hope that the counties, that we have enough sway. Hennepin County doesn't have all the metro legislators, and I can't imagine that we wouldn't have, yes, but they can't do that without all those people agreeing. So that makes me less nervous.
What is that ballpark? What does that bring in?
I don't even know.
I don't know the amount it brings in a year.
Did we have numbers in that AMC packet? I feel like I saw.
I think we did have
I didn't remember where I saw that.
some
Would that
numbers.
number be enough or too much? I don't know.
Like, what is our number? They must have it parsed out by, because what is it?
So they have a 50 million shortfall now to keep it $100 million and 1.7 billion for the next decade. The ballpark tax was established in 2005. It does not say in here though.
Yeah, they're looking, I think they had this repurposed ballpark sales taxes talks about it would be raising it
320 annually for health.
320 million, but then to be able to use it for still target field public infrastructure, and that's how they're gonna extend some library programs.
And if I'm reading this letter, so basically, from the uncompensated care outside.
Oh, I think more than.
I think it's 40% of the trauma and special.
Is that a separate bucket?
Oh, I suppose that would be less than their whole thing, but yeah, you're right. Looks like a quarter of the uncompensated care comes from outside.
But they're still potentially losing on every transaction, trying to make it up on volume, so to speak.
But they're actually not, they cut a lot of beds and they're cutting some
Yeah,
programs.
yeah.
And
No,
right
I
now,
know.
they're not letting people in from outside the county
I know it's the same with that.
because it can't, they're ready to close down.
So in this letter, or whatever this letter would look like, John's question and Anoka County's, like, are we signing ourselves up for something that more shifts, more shifts from the state, that the state kicks in, which I realize that this has to have some sort of solution. The state comes up with all this money that they got from shifting last year, making the budget look better than it is.
It seems to me if they wanted to, they would have come out with the gate, need a sales tax metro-wide. They didn't do that. They asked to shift, and they're asking for support in that, which to me says that was their intent, or they would have come out with a gate.
Well, and I think our letter, the only thing we're asking is your support of the legislation. Like, I think it's easy to say, we didn't support anything other than that. So,
That's what Commissioner Ulrich and I decided the letter was pretty
Right.
clear. We're not supporting anything other than that.
And I'm not saying it's not a fine purpose, we have our interpretations, and then you get down to St. Paul, and it's.
I understand.
Oh, yeah.
but they could have that interpretation, yeah.
Right,
This is a much easier lift.
I support it.
I support it.
All right.
And
One other thing I wanted to just let you know, we received yesterday, Tracy and I opened, the Shakopee Metawakan Sioux community is asking to put the old YMCA building into trust. Typically, we send a comment letter that talks about change in, tax. In this case, there won't be a change in tax because they weren't a taxable entity anyway on the Y. So I'm just looking, do we want to send a letter or do we just accept this the way it is?
We have our, kind of our normal letter that we.
We have a standard letter that we would pull but I usually talk about we're different than being a mill rate state and how it impacts us. In this case, I don't have that to document.
Maybe we could talk about it over breakfast sometime.
Just looking for direction.
I would
It's odd, isn't it?
consistent.
It's attached to a church and they're gonna have trust. And isn't that YMCA directly attached to the building?
Yes.
So you have one, this is also trust and this is.
Mhm.
I would keep our message consistent.
Okay,
Just have to adjust the letter a little
just
bit for
adjust
the
the letter,
tax
but send the
issue.
letter. Okay,
I mean, I think our letter is pretty generic.
it is.
If they take a hammer, crack in the wall.
That's interesting.
No, it's connected. You can walk right from the Y to the church over to McKenna Crossing. They're all connected. That's what I had. What do you have for round robin?
Well, I have been meeting with the, well, it's past time, but so we can be quick. AMC Solid Waste Working Group, and there's been conversation about whether do we continue or whether we dissolve. I think what we've done in the past is have presentations about solid waste. But we haven't actually done much to further solid waste. So I just need to know from you what your thoughts are, if we should continue on or not continue on. I think we need maybe have a conversation about solid waste at in our county. I don't know what your thoughts are, and if you feel that I should say to the AMC group, I think we're done or not done, and we should continue on with solid waste programs.
Fred, when does solid waste come to Scott Delivery?
April.
April. So it will be next month. We'll have solid waste that Scott delivers, that second meeting, Commissioner, as well.
Okay. I think the thought from AMC is we need to do something with the group or disband from the staff there.
I think it depends on what value you see from it, we're probably not at a place where we're making we're making decisions. Hard to know.
Right, and from what I understand from Kate is that there is a MPCA group that's going to be formed in the next few months for the metro counties. So I don't know if there's any benefit to have a AMC.
When we set up, right, Tracy, the meeting with our neighbors, just to give you the history of some swim club and things like that from their perspective. So that's coming up in the next month, I think, as well.
Okay.
I think we're kind of like,
I'll go. Okay.
I have enough.
All right. All right. Well, I know that the co-chairs are going to be talking at the conference tomorrow or the next day. So I guess I'll leave it with them. Okay.
You're welcome and staff.
Brian?
Do you welcome any staff response to that in this setting?
Well, I don't know if I was invited to that either. I know,
Right now.
Like right now?
yeah, I would.
I think it's run its course. I think part of the reason we tried to, that we were part of the push to form that AMC working group was because at a District 10 meeting, either here or out in Canterbury, there was talk about MPCA is supposed to get this Metro Commissioner Solid Waste Group going, and they were supposed to be doing that for quite some time, and it wasn't happening. So we tried to get folks together to just start meeting and invite folks from MPCA, but not wait around for them to convene something. We could get that going. I think the level setting, not only in the metro area, but across the state, and including haulers and nonprofits, and like, I think it's been really good.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably all it's going to do. And I would say just pause it, maybe do what Commissioner Ulrich mentioned with the 169 Corridor Coalition, to say we've done good work. We're gonna pause these regular meetings because we've educated ourselves. We have incorporated solid waste into the AMC legislative platform, but we don't need to keep this moving just to keep it moving.
Okay.
Do what government typically does. I would say serve the purpose, stop it, and if you need to reconvene the group, reconvene the group. But that's me.
Thank you for
I agree.
articulating that. I think that's kind of seemed like our message here. The one thing I would say is I would hope it would be reconvened if there's a threat at MPCA or those levels that counties need to react to. You know, their whole, I mean, I think we've gotten past that threat of them putting, you know, burning as a way lesser, you know, I think that's what that group should be used for, is to reconvene quickly if there's a threat to the solid waste, what's that, hierarchy?
Hierarchy, yeah.
There we go. So that would be my only thing, is that it should somehow be ready to be reconvened for that specific purpose.
Okay.
And then just got County delivered, since we're on solid waste, I'd love it if that presentation also included, like, if there's some feedback from us on where we're going on a couple different issues, because it is such a big issue.
Mhm.
Maybe that'd be a great time to get it too, if you want to give us any like pre-work.
Okay,
Well, and I think organics is one, like these haulers, Commissioner Brennan brings it up, and how is Belle Plaine gonna handle organics by 2029 when it needs to be planned and up and running, right? I mean, we're only a couple years from that now.
Right.
yes. And tentatively, on March 17th, there could be a workshop just on some opportunities that Blue Earth County is presenting to Scott County. And so we are trying to get that coordinated today, but
Right.
that's another topic that we can all work through together.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Round robin.
Any other round robin?
I just have a question now that we're kind of changing our workshop format here. It seemed like we used to put workshop presentations in our agenda. They were online. I know they weren't today. Are we gonna do it different?
We just didn't have time to get that one in, everything else we've been chasing down. So in the future, I think they will be. Sometimes we just don't. make
Right.
it.
Okay, but the protocol still is we're going to
Fine.
as Raybo.
We're
Okay,
trying.
just wondering in case somebody asks me, because somebody might. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll get the PowerPoint out there now for folks that want to see it.
So when does the video go on? Okay.
Yeah, it's not streamed, right? It's just perfected.
Is that the long
Can I
term
ask
approach?
about
Recorded.
this
Folks, okay.
email yesterday?
Right.
We're still being recorded.
Okay.
Yeah.
We go on recording.
So they're looking.
Bob says that's gonna be an epidemic.
Well, that's what I tried to say in my comments at the end. We are getting bombarded in
Oh, I
HHS with emails like this.
Oh,
And Barb is probably dealing, and Suzanne and Brittany and Jamie with these folks, you know, once a day. And so as people aren't, the providers aren't receiving their payments and these things are held up, they're dropping clients who then have issues. And
okay, so they're not just, they've only got us once so far. You guys have been doing
Yes,
most of the stuff.
yes. Well, you don't always get them all.
I
Sometimes it's
see.
staff
Yeah,
that gets them and has to deal with them. So there are more and more of these until they resolve what we're gonna do at the federal and state issue on some of these. So that, what do they have? The 259 million hold now for Medicaid, the threat of the 550 quarter hold. And so all of that then puts pressure on the system. And we're being told, continue to process, continue to do your applications, continue to move things through, so.
Well, and I've heard a little bit, I'm starting to hear from providers a little bit. There's plenty of people in our community, they're for-profit business owners providing these services who are falling way behind and make a lot of business. So they're mad at me for all kinds of things, but now mad that the government is forcing them out of business when we're supposed to.
Right.
When they went through all the hoops to get licensed and all the things.
And then one of the proposals down there, Barb was saying, was for the county to pick up the case management now of all of these individual cases. For Scott County alone, what did she say? It was
40 to 50 staff.
40 to 50 staff we would have to take on?
So that's because we contract out at least half of our case management. And that's been allowed and promoted for all kinds of reasons, but there's a few legislators and there's some citizens who don't think the county should do that. And there's some people who think, I think wrongly so, that that's how fraud happens.
Right.
No, so that has actually a fairly good chance of happening. That could happen, that they could say no contracted case managers. Because some people are saying counties are advocating doing their jobs by hiring other people to do our jobs,
Well,
which I don't
also-
agree with on mine.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why if you call me.
Well, and in some cases, so I've also heard from folks that enjoyed having the option.
Yes.
The whole idea is that hopefully it costs us less to do that same job than versus having it in-house, so, but also options.
It's a combination of cost, it's a combination of options, and I think that choice is good for people. But if we want to keep our tax, right, that's part of that whole discussion.
Well, it's timely, of course, the session is, what are we in our start of our third week, and are we all going down tomorrow? You're going down to meet with Big Shots, out on some tables. Are we all going down tomorrow?
$3.5 million hit.
Well, I'm just saying this, I don't carry this. Make sure that we have these updated real-time needs as we go down and find folks that will listen
I
to
do
us.
think the contracted case management is something to talk with everybody in our delegation about, because they may be hearing it talked about in a much different light. Important for us to say that we think it's fiscally responsible. We think it's giving Scott County citizens more choice. We think I think it's a good blend. Like we have
Right.
employed case managers, and we have contracted case managers, so we can find the best service for these families of, who have folks with disabilities or elderly people. I mean, these are the people that are serving. They're not serving, you're either disabled or elderly. Is really the issue.
Well, I think another important part along this same line, round robin, but along these lines, for when we get our, with AMC on the Hill, we get our time slots with our delegation. Sometimes you get a little bit outside of our delegation or catch somebody in the hall, which is great. But the more and more we do this, they go to their resident expert, so to speak, either in the House side or the Senate side. It might be helpful, at least for me, to along with our priorities, like who do the insiders see as the insiders on these particular topics, so that we can make sure that when we see them, we're having these same conversations. Because a lot of times with our delegation, it's always good to repeat the message, because they're getting hammered by all kinds of different special interests. Some counties are coming down. So to reemphasize what our priorities are, which I know we're a regional thinker, statewide thinker, but also knowing who they might go talk to in the caucus to get up to speed on whatever those particular priorities are. So that, because we're standing outside the hall, and we see some of these guys and gals go by, to make sure we're talking to them as well.
Commissioner Brecky does that in DC. She sees Representative Stauber walking down the hall and jumps across and grabs him by the hand.
Yeah.
Barbara Brecky, Commissioner,
Yes.
Scott County.
You bet you can't do it.
Did that?
Smith's just a notion.
I might
They
have.
didn't call the police, did they?
She might have done that.
All right. Aaron,
On
can we
Cable's last,
press X?
Yep.
Are we done recording?
Okay.
how was it? It was good, right?
One, when